I'm your host, Brandy Fleck, and this is Human Amplified. This is a show about our existence, our place in the world, what it all means, and ways to make it better. From big picture ideas that blow your mind to practical life advice, we explore it all. We amplify the voices of healers, survivors, mystics, disruptors, scientists, creatives, and everyday people like you and me to expand our consciousness and use that awareness to evolve into who we really want to be in the depths of our soul. Humans Amplified. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoy this episode, please go rate and review the show. And remember to subscribe where you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Support for this podcast comes from Bed of Nails. You've probably seen acupressure products before, maybe in your Facebook feed or something like that. It could be for any number of brands, but it's a fact that the Bed of Nails is the Swedish original. I've been using the Bed of Nails mat and pillow since 2012. Before they were popular, no joke. I personally remember when no other products were widely available and when I was scared to even try it. But I did try it. When you lay on it at first, it can get a little uncomfortable, but that's short-lived. After a few minutes, your back gets warm, starts pulsing, and then starts to relax. You quickly get used to distributing your weight on the Bed of Nails, and it's nothing but a welcomed reprieve from a stressful day. Over the years, it's helped me increase circulation, relax, and reduce pain in my back and neck. I also use my Bed of Nails every single time I meditate, and I love it. If you feel like you would like to do the same, you can shop my Bed of Nails affiliate link to get yours. I have put that link in the show notes of the episode, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can find it in the description of this video. And there is also a discount code there for you where you can get 15% off at checkout. So be sure to go get it. Today, we're talking to Nashville-based yoga instructor, doula, and activist Renee Watkins about reconnecting to your body to make a real difference. And what does that actually mean? It means using breathwork, which is the common thread among all of Renee's passions and pursuits, so you can find not only emotional healing for yourself, but also for your community. It's evident that Renee cares deeply about helping people, and she starts at home with her local community here in Nashville. Through Renee's yoga practice, she's breaking down stereotypes and creating safe, inclusive spaces for Black and brown women. We get into all of that in this episode, plus we also talk about why it's important to be in tune with your body, what your body can tell you, how to start making a difference while protecting your peace, releasing anger, and breathing the correct way. And you might be surprised about what the right way actually is. Then we get into the topic of high birth mortality rates, especially for Black women in the United States, what to do to minimize birth trauma, and how it all fits together with yoga, human advocacy, and teaching our kids what they really need to know so they can avoid some of the pitfalls we're seeing in our time. We finish up the episode talking about sexuality and sensuality and dealing with the repression of it. It's all connected. Throughout the episode, Renee gives us awesome expert advice, and she mixes in personal stories too, so you'll love getting to know her and her bright personality. Her yoga practice, which is her primary focus right now, is called RW Yoga. She's trained extensively in Vinyasa, Rocket, and prenatal yoga. This episode does come with a trigger warning. About halfway through, maybe a little before, we start talking about sex education with several hard truths, and then move into the topic of birth trauma with real life examples. These are very important, critical conversations to have, but proceed with caution if these topics are triggering for you. Now, let's dive in. For the links mentioned throughout this episode, visit the show notes at humanamplified.com/episodes/122. What does being human mean to you?
I have never been asked that question before. I don't know. I think being human to me means sharing similar experiences and just understanding that life is life, right? Things happen, and whatever happens, the sun is still kind of gonna rise and set.
All right, everybody. Today we are welcoming to the show Renee Watkins. She's a yoga instructor and a doula, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And she's coming to us from Nashville, Tennessee. Renee, can you just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Again, I am Renee Watkins. I am a mom first. I am a certified yoga instructor. I'm certified in Vinyasa prenatal yoga and rocket yoga. And I am a trained doula, lactation consultant, and an activist. And according to my 4-year-old niece, I'm the best auntie in the world. So.
Awesome. Yeah, that's always good. So there's a lot to cover there. And I love that you do all of these things. And I feel like they're all sort of connected. Would you say that they're connected?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
First off, I guess let's jump into the yoga aspect of things and just what's your favorite style of yoga?
You know what's funny? Ashtanga yoga is my favorite. I don't teach it. I've never taught it. I don't think I could ever teach it. But it's like a series, and it's extremely challenging on the body, and it's a lot of the bendy, flexy, balancing poses that I like. I love it. I love it so much.
Awesome. Okay. Do you love it because of the challenge or what's so great about it?
It's the challenge. Honestly, when I first started yoga, I started just because of the Instagram challenge, or I started from an Instagram challenge. And the challenge that I did was from Kino Yoga, and she's like one of the top Ashtanga yoga instructors that I know. And there was this pose, it was a wounded peacock pose. So basically, it's a pose where you're balancing on one hand. Yeah, you're literally just balancing your whole body on one hand. And I was like, I think I can do that. And I did it. And so like from there, I kind of took some of her online classes, and then I found other Ashtanga instructors online, and I kind of did that. I don't think I've ever taken an Ashtanga class in person, but I'm gonna look for some in Nashville. But it's amazing. You should try it. Definitely.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I'll look into that. I've always done like vinyasa yoga. So you mentioned that you're an activist, and I was reading on your website that you are breaking down stereotypes around yoga. And so I would love for you to tell us a little more about how you do that with your practice, what those stereotypes are, or anything about that.
Hmm. So like the history of America is it's always been in black and white, right? And there has always been some type of racism or some type of prejudice surrounding skin color. And when I first started teaching yoga, when I went to Kali Yoga here in Nashville, and there was only me and one other person, Jamal Hutchinson. He's actually literally the reason why I got my yoga teacher certification. But we were the first two Black people to ever go through their yoga teacher training program. And that was in
Wow.
2014. That was in 2014. And for me, I was like, I think it's too late in life for Black people to still be doing the first of anything. Like, why is that still a thing? And then when we went through the program, I noticed how there were not many Black people that came to class, or brown people, or any other person other than like white people that came to class, or white presenting people that came to class. And I'm like, why is that? But then I also understood like you go where you're comfortable, right? And so if I go into a place where it's only blue people, I'm probably not going to feel comfortable in that space, right? Because in a lot of situations, like we don't have the same experiences.
Hmm.
And I'm like, yoga is the one place where it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't feel like that. And so one thing I have to think about is the price of yoga, right? Sometimes you can get a yoga class for $45 a session. That's expensive to me, maybe because I'm cheap, but not everybody can afford that. And so when I was going through training, one of the things that I was told is never go teach at the public parks, because they're not gonna appreciate you. But then the classes were $3. And so I was like, I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna go there. And again, like it was the same experience. Like a lot of my students were white, right? And I didn't have a problem with it, but I'm like, no, like let's get more people here, and because of that space. And I taught at the parks that were in income neighborhoods. I taught at all the parks really, but I requested the parks that were in low income neighborhoods specifically, right? Because I was like, no, let's
Hmm.
see if we can get more diversity in the room, right? And it happened. And I was like, well, it could be diverse if you allow it to be, right? It doesn't
Hmm.
have to be this one, you know, I remember my dad was like, that's only for skinny white women. I'm like, I'm not a skinny white woman. So that's not true. But yeah, just I think it was being more intentional about making people feel safe in my classes, and I think it helped.
That's great. And that leads me to how do you make people feel safe? How do you create a safe space? And how can other practitioners do the same?
I show up as me. And I think that's what I mean, that's what I appreciate. Like I also think I'm hilarious, right? I think I'm the funniest person in the world. Even if you don't laugh, I laugh at myself. Um just going in space is always making people feel the way I would want to feel, right? The golden rule, treat people the way you want to be treated and just showing up as that. And not making it about the money. And so there have been so many times, oh my God, so many times where people came to class and they didn't have the $5 or $3 for class, and I'm like, okay, I'll take care of it, right? Because it's a cup of coffee, right? I'll take care of it. Or just allowing people to bring their kids. I'm always one where like there was a young girl who she had a newborn. Oh my goodness. And the baby was crying during the class and I was teaching holding the baby, right? So like never allowing it to be a place where like you can't come, right?
Yeah.
I will say like, hey, if you know that your kid is gonna run around the class, like let's just be mindful of the other people in the room. But then also like those type of kids, like, hey, do you want to teach my class for me? Right? Let's do cartwheels in class, or just making it not making anybody feel bad for whatever reason that they can come up with, right? And so even on my website, when I was teaching in a space, not giving anybody room or an excuse to say, hey, I can't come. So if you couldn't come into the in-person class, there was a virtual link available, right? If you couldn't afford it, I'm like, hey, like, do you receive government assistance, right? So if you can show me proof of government assistance, then we can work on however much you can pay. And then again, going back to the thing about your kids, like you don't have a babysitter, like it's a public park. You can bring them there and they can run around in the gym while you take class, or they can run around the park or something while you take class, or they can come in class and they can do the yoga class with us.
Yeah, and sort of removing obstacles, I guess, for
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's pivot a little bit into being in tune with our bodies because I feel like so many people are disconnected from their bodies like at this point in time. Why is it so important to tune in?
When I see that question, I want to be really careful about my words, right? I think we are in a place where I feel like everybody's losing their minds. I really feel like everybody's losing their minds. And it's so easy to disconnect from what you feel physically and mentally, right?
Mhm.
And the reason why it's so important is because once you detach from the physical body, you're just really out here. Like I always say, are you living or existing? Right? So if you're ex just existing, you're just kind of like going with the day to day and you're not really experiencing life. And it's important to tap in with your body so you can just know like, hey, like this thing is happening in the world and I don't like it. I don't feel, you know what I mean? I don't feel good about it. And so being in tune with your body just allows you to have a human experience, right? It just goes back to that human experience. And so I don't think a lot of us are even having that.
Yeah, ooh,
Mhm.
that is I love your answer. Like I didn't think about it like that, but without tuning in to our bodies, it disconnects us from the entire human experience.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So so you mentioned when you were talking about tuning into your body, like it allows you to feel, it allows you to know if you like something, if you don't like something. What else, and I didn't plan this question, but what else can your body sort of tell you?
It can tell you when something isn't normal, right? So, like for me, I don't watch the news. I don't because one thing, I don't know who told me this, but like, let's say for instance, there's a tragedy in your neighborhood. You can go help clean up, you can offer the people food, you could, I don't know, like go search for somebody who's missing. But in China, if something happens there, there's literally nothing you can do. And your body kind of reacts to not being able to do anything and you feel helpless. And so if you're watching the news every single day there's a moment where you're feeling helpless about something that you have absolutely no control of. You can't help. The only thing you can do is donate to GoFundMe, right? And sometimes people just want to do more. And so with that being said, I think it's important to kind of control what you consume. It's just the same thing about like what you eat, right? So if you know that chicken makes your stomach hurt, you're not going to eat it,
Hmm.
right? If you know watching the news is going to hurt your feelings, why watch it? Some people, I have a friend who's like, I watch the news for the weather. And I'm like, you can get that on your phone. You don't have to do that. And so just putting yourself in a place where you're just controlling what you consume, right? All the time. Hopefully I'm answering your question. I feel like I'm not.
Yeah, no, no. I think that's a really great point, because you said your body can tell you when something's not normal. And I think what I'm taking away from what you're saying is that there are toxins,
Hmm.
more than just physical toxins. There are toxins that enter your body in all kinds of ways.
Hmm.
And I think toxins disconnect you from your body.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay.
If everything around you is negative, that's what you're going to be.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're negative, that's not normal for a person to always be angry, always be sad, always be hurt. Because what happens is like, I used to hold grudges a lot when I was little, right? And I used to always also have stomach problems. And my grandma was like, let it go. Like you're mad at somebody about something that they probably don't even know that they did to you, and your stomach is hurting because you're upset. So a lot of these things manifest in your body. And so like if you are walking around with an angry face all the time, you probably get a lot of headaches.
Mm,
Right? So it'll manifest in your body if you need to let it go. So let it go.
yeah.
Hmm.
What about the people who really want, well, they feel like they need to be informed so that they can do something? How would you go about being informed to then help?
That is such a loaded question. You can't save everybody, Peter Parker, and it's not realistic. And I get it, and that's the same thought that I had about doula work. I was like, I'm gonna go change the narrative for all Black birthing moms. It's like, no, you can't do that. You have to do what is immediately around you, right? And so, I remember
Mhm.
when I was little, do you remember the Feed the Children commercials?
Yeah, yeah.
I used to always feel like I would have to give those people all of my money. And then my dad, my granddad was like, you know that there's people here in Nashville who could use that same help, right? There's people who probably live next door to you who need food, right? There's people down the street. There's people that you walk past every single day who need their light bill paid or their rent paid or clothes or shoes or something. And so my motto is I'm not going to ignore you if you need my help, right? If I can touch you, if I can put my eyes on you, I'll help you. But sometimes you have to be selfish about what you can and can't do,
Mm,
right? You
yeah.
can't save every single person. You're not going to be able to save every single person, but it's really important to try to help, try to aid the people who are in your immediate community.
Awesome. Wonderful point. Okay.
Mhm.
So that brings me to emotional healing being tied to the body. Why and how is it all tied together?
So remember the statement I made about like if you hold grudges, your stomach's gonna hurt, right? That's important because whatever you are thinking, it manifests in your body. And I am a firm believer, like a firm believer of whatever you interact with, whatever emotion that you feel in your mind, you feel it in your body. And it's so true. Like you can almost well, not almost, you can research it and it'll tell you like, hey, if you're having trouble with your feet, this is probably what you're going through in life,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you have neck pain, this is direct relation. If you have kidney problems or if you have liver problems, and it's so detailed. And so one of my favorite books is The Secret, and it talks so much about manifesting your thoughts. And so if your thought is always, I'm gonna have a bad day, you're absolutely gonna have a bad day, right? Or if your thought is, my boyfriend is gonna break up with you, hey babe, we need to talk,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so just being mindful about what you're thinking, and again going back to what you're consuming. And so if you're watching the news and every time you watch the news it frustrates you and it makes you sad, why do you keep doing it, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
just being I think being mindful of what you're thinking, what you're consuming is important for your physical and mental well-being.
Well, and I was reading in your bio that when you got into yoga, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I saw when you got into yoga, you experienced way more emotional healing than you had anticipated. Can you
Oh
tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. So when I was little, we grew up in the housing projects. And so my mom's little brother, her only brother, he would always say, like, you're gonna have to fight a lot because you're different, right? It's like you talk different, you don't look like everybody else. I was like tall and skinny with really big lips. And I had like this really weird red looking hair. And I was extremely proper. growing up in the projects because there was a saying, and I still get it, you talk like a white girl. And I'm like, what does that mean? Right? I didn't understand what it, and I would always challenge somebody. And I'm one of those people who knows really random facts for absolutely no reason, right? And so, and my uncle was like, I remember him telling me from like the time I was 5, and he was right. I used to have to fight all the time. And so when I got older, I was always angry and I was always on edge because I'm like, I'm always ready to fight because somebody's going to try to challenge me in a way that I don't like. And then, getting older, it's like that causes trouble, right? That causes trouble. And so when I started yoga, it was because my runway coach was like, hey, like we have this fashion show coming up. And I think it was like either a lingerie or a swimsuit show. It's like we have this show coming up and I don't like going to the gym because I bulk up, right? It's like I don't like that. I want to stay slender, I want to stay toned. And he was like, do yoga or Pilates. And I had seen Pilates classes and they looked crazy. Like they looked so hard. And I was like, let's try yoga because what I thought is probably what a lot of people think. It's going to be like you just sitting there and you're praying and you're stretching and that's the class. But then I think when I first started, I was like, oh, I'm sweating. Um, and again, going back to me starting from yoga challenges on Instagram, one of the very first poses that I came in contact with was a headstand, right? And so trying to do a headstand and being angry does not work, right? I
Mm.
fell through the wall, like I fell on the side, I had a bruise on my forehead. It was just like you can't do it angry. And
Whoa.
so, yeah, I had to calm myself down so I can get into it. And I was like, oh, right. And so I learned very early on, take deep breaths, right? I'm frustrated because I can't get this pose. Just take a breath, right? Come back to it a little bit later and then you can do it. And so that's how I started to deal with life, right? I'm frustrated with my mom. I'm frustrated with traffic. I'm frustrated with school or work or the kids or whatever the case may be. It's like you can't deal with anything if you're already upset, right? Because if you're mad, you're just going to make everything worse. And so take a deep breath. Okay, let's deal with this now. And it makes life so much easier. Like even now, I teach my son, before you do everything, inhale and exhale, and then proceed. And that's just
Mm.
how I do it now.
How did you actually let the anger go? Was it just like, did the breath just release it?
It did. It did. And so, going back to Jamal Hutchinson, one thing he would always say is inhale, you interhale, exhale, you exhale, right? So if you inhale and you're holding on, right? Because you can't hold on. Like if I tell you to inhale right now and I don't tell you to exhale, you're eventually going to exhale yourself, right? You're gonna be
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm turning blue, like I'm dying. And so just if you think about it that way, right? And so if you and I have a negative experience, right? I'm gonna take it in. It's gonna be natural for me to take it in and just be like, dang, like she really just pissed me off, right? And I can choose to hold that and make every situation around me just based off the experience or that one negative experience that I had with you. Or I can just be like, you know what? Okay, that's what happened, and then release it. And so that's literally if you inhale, you pull in something that you need. If you exhale, you release everything that does not serve you. It works every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. So breath work, I guess, is part of yoga. Do you do breath work in all of your classes?
Yes, all the time because people breathe the wrong way, like naturally. I don't think we're ever taught how to breathe. So a lot of times when people inhale, they flatten their chest and they flatten their belly. When in actuality, when you inhale, you're supposed to lift your chest and your belly is supposed to balloon. Because if you
Mm.
think about it, like you're pulling something in, right? You're filling your belly, you're filling your lungs. So it should get bigger. When you exhale, it's supposed to go all flat, right? And so a lot of people are used to working out, or a lot of people that I deal with, they're used to working out. And so like they're just panting and they're lightheaded, they're breathing in through their mouth and they're like, I'm like, are you tired? Or is it that you're breathing wrong? Right. And so if I tell you like, hey, breathe in through your nose and out of your nose, that's going to help you a lot. Or if I tell you to breathe in through your nose and out of your mouth, that's going to slow your heart rate. And so I teach that in classes a lot. Like, so, and it's even a part of vinyasa. So like on a pose where you're coming up, you inhale. On the pose you go down, you exhale. And so
Mm.
yeah, definitely teach that in class because my classes, I think, are a little bit harder than other people's classes. So if I'm not teaching you about breath, you're not going to make it.
Why do you think people breathe that way?
I don't know. I don't think I've ever researched it enough to even, I don't know. Because when babies breathe, when babies do it, babies are literally perfect.
Hmm.
So they breathe correctly, right?
Yeah.
I don't know at what point in life it's just like, let me do this all the wrong way. Because
Yeah.
are you thinking about your breath? Because you don't have to think about your breath. Like,
Yeah. It's
Like what?
funny that you brought this up because I went through some trauma informed coaching training a couple years ago. And as part of that, I was like, I basically relearned how to breathe
Mhm.
and I realized what was happening. And then when I would talk to clients, I'd be like, breathe like this. And they're like, that feels weird.
Yeah, it does.
And I started to think back to childhood, and I have memories of breathing with like focusing on breathing with your
Hmm.
stomach going out. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I wonder if trauma changes it.
It has to. And like if there's a point, if that is the case, there's a point in every person's life where like some type of trauma changes their breath. And what is that trauma? Like, do we all share the same trauma? Like, is it a nightmare or something that changes your breath? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Mhm.
Or, yeah, but it's interesting to think about.
Mhm.
Well, okay, so let's pivot here. There's definitely some other things I want to get to, but maybe we can talk about your doula work for a minute because we were just talking about trauma and the mortality rates in the US, especially for Black women, are staggering, and especially for a developed nation.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts around that? Is there anything we can do, and what's going on?
I say this a lot and people get mad at me. I think we need to put sex ed back in school. That's gonna be where it starts because I know for me, when I was younger, my parents, I don't remember a point where my parents ever talked to me about sex. It was just kind of like, it can happen. I think my granddad, he rest his soul. But he would tell us if you were ever to, if you like kiss the guy, you get AIDS. It's like it's not realistic, right?
Yeah.
But it was really like he was old and he didn't want his grandbabies to have kids. Like he had three daughters and one boy, and then my mom had three girls. It's scary, right? So sex ed, one, it teaches boys and girls about their bodies. It teaches you about your reproductive system. It teaches you what happens if you do have sex, right? And I think if we had that in school, the easier job for parents would be like, hey, like, I don't want you to have sex because of everything that comes with it.
Hmm.
But if you do, right, this is how you protect yourself, right? If you don't want to have sex, this is how you get yourself out of that situation, right? These are the people it's okay for you to have sex with, right? All of these different things. Because what happens, like, there are a lot of women when you get into labor and delivery they know more about their car seat and their stroller and their gender reveal pictures than they do about their actual bodies. And there are so many women who don't know that you have three holes in the bottom part of your butt. Right? They think, like, I had this one lady who thought that, and I don't know if I can say this on here, but she thought she urinated out of her clitoris. And I was like, and I wanted to understand. I wanted to understand. And I was like, I could see how you could think that, but no, right? They thought she didn't know that there was I'm gonna use it for layman's terms. She didn't know she had a pee hole. And I'm like, where do you think you pee from?
Yeah.
And she's like, my clitoris. And I'm like, no, you don't. And then even where she has her cycle, she didn't know where that came from. And so I'm like, in sex ed, because I remember when I went to school, we had a sex ed class. It was the scariest thing I had ever seen because we watched a person have a baby. But I remember learning that in class, like in when I was like 12, right? And
Hmm.
so just being more informed about your body is a great start because a lot
Hmm.
of women just don't know. And of course, men don't know. Why would you know? You don't have a vagina. Like, why would you? You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think it's important for parents to have the tools to have those conversations. And again, like in school, I think you should have it. I think you should have that information because it's not there anymore. Kids are having sex. So let's talk to them about it,
Yeah.
right?
And then for the people who do make it through the birthing process alive,
Yeah.
how can we minimize trauma, I guess, during that whole experience and even after?
A doula. A doula is always going to be my go-to. I think all OBGYN and birth nurses and all of them, I think they should go through doula training because a lot of it is bedside manner. A lot
Hmm.
of it is bedside manner. I had this first time mom, she panicked. I don't like going to the hospital, so I almost get to the point where my clients are like about to have their baby before I'm like, okay, let's go to the hospital, right?
Hmm.
I had this one birth mom. She was just panicking, and I knew what it was. It's like when you are scared, you tense up, right? And so I almost knew that she was squeezing that baby in, right? So I'm like, you have to relax. You have to relax. And so the OBGYN that she had kept coming in the room was like, hey, if you don't hurry up and have this baby, your baby's gonna die. why would you tell her that?
What?
Why would you tell her that? And the nurses were like, they kept wanting to check her. And she was like, it hurts. And I'm like, stop checking her. I was like, you can tell them to stop checking you. And she was like, well, you know, you can't just sit in the hospital all day. And I'm like, that is literally what you do in the hospital. Like, you come in the hospital, you sit until you're okay. And you sit until you're better or you die. You know what I mean? Like, you literally, you do nothing but sit in the hospital. And so, even that, somebody who understood, this is the first time mom, she's scared out of her mind, right? If you understood how to talk to her, like, hey, I need you to relax. What can we do to help you relax, right? I know you and your doula are in here doing birth work. And that was another thing. I mean, breath work. We're doing breath work and they kept busting into like, hey, you need to lay down. And it's almost like not even asking. It's like, hey, I'm gonna do such and such. No, you can ask if you can
Yeah.
check her cervix. You can ask if you can take her blood pressure. You can ask to take her blood. Like, you can ask all of these questions, and she has the option to say yes or no. And that goes back to education for mom and dad, right? Education when you're a kid, so that you can know what your rights are when you go to the hospital. You can know what the
Mm.
rights are according to your body, right? You don't
Yeah.
have to have your cervix checked during any point of pregnancy. But a lot of women don't know that. They think when you go in there, you have to let these people check your cervix, and that's not the case.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah. I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
yeah. No, you can tell them no. You can tell them no about everything, honestly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, that would have made it so much better.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. So you're basically an advocate for these
Hmm.
moms as a
Hmm.
doula.
Hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
that's what it is. That's a part of the job title. You're advocating for mom and baby.
So how does your doula work tie in to the yoga work that you do?
Breath. So all of my doula clients, I offer them yoga. It's just a part of it. And one of the major components of it. So like as part of yoga, a lot of people think the physical part is yoga. Yoga is actually the yoga that you see is actually called asana. But breath work or pranayama is another part of yoga. Yoga has 8 limbs, right? And so a part of that, I teach them about breath work, right? Because if you are in pain or if you're scared, it's natural for you to hold your breath. If you're in pain and you're holding your breath, that means you're focusing on the pain, so it hurts more, right? So have you ever seen the videos of the kids about to get like a vaccine or something, and then like the doctor scares them or like they make something funny and like the kid is not even thinking about it, and so like they don't even know that they get the shot, right?
Hmm.
So it's the same thing. Like if I'm telling you to breathe or if I'm telling you to focus on something completely different, it's not going to be as bad, right? And so I think even in yoga, if I'm telling you to focus on your breath, you're not thinking about me telling you to do like 100 push-ups, right? Just focus on your breath. Don't think about it. So yeah, it kind of goes hand in hand. And what's funny about it is when I went through doula training with Home of Heart Birth and Wellness Collective. It's a community doula program here in Nashville, and I think it's absolutely amazing. And when I was going through the program, I had already been thinking about doing my prenatal yoga teacher training. And Kristen Mejia, the lady who's over the program, she reached out. She was like, "Hey, you want to do prenatal yoga?" And I was like, "Listen, I'm actually about to pay the lady like $1 million to to go through the training." She was like, "I'll take care of it. We need a prenatal doula." And so it kind of, I mean, a
That's
prenatal
awesome.
yoga instructor through the program. And so that's how I got my certification. Yeah.
Okay. Ooh,
Hmm.
so the doors just opened up.
Just opened up. Yeah.
Do you feel like this is a calling for you?
I have my moments. I have my moments because I took a sabbatical from doula work. I took a sabbatical from life, honestly. But it was mo mainly doula work because the statement I made earlier about like you can't save everybody, Batman. It came from like wanting to change the experience of every birth mom that I came in contact with. Like literally, even now, if I'm at like Walmart or something and I see a pregnant lady, I want to ask her a million questions. I want to change her posture. I want to change the way she's breathing. I want to even change like the fact that she's in Walmart because I hate Walmart, right? Don't come here, it's stressful. Um, so I had to take a step back and just be like, Renee, you can't. Because at the end of the day, I can give you all the information in the world, but you're still going to do what you want to do, right? That old
Yeah.
saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Hmm.
And whereas I personally have not ever lost a mom or baby while they were under my care, I do know it happens, right? I know people who have lost friends and family members. I know people who have even lost clients. And even when you hear about it, you're like, oh, you know, or even working with people. Because I'm one of those people where if I'm like telling you my price, I'm like, hey, my price for my whole package is 3,500. If you're like, oh, I don't want to pay that, I'm like, okay, what can you pay?
Hmm.
Right? Because I want to help. Because I know that being Black and going into the labor delivery room, my experience is not going to be like your experience. I'm not saying that you're not going to have a terrible experience, but when you even think about Serena Williams, one of the most noticeable athletes in American culture, right? For her to have her baby and almost die because the doctors and the nurses are ignoring her when she's telling them, hey, like this thing is happening to my body
Yeah.
and I know it's not normal, right? I know this isn't right. This doesn't feel good. And for them to ignore her and you almost die during labor and delivery because these people are not listening to you.
Yeah.
That has to say so much about the regular smegular woman who goes into labor and delivery and it's like, hey, like before I had this baby, like it was normal for me to breathe. I'm trying to catch my breath and I can't catch my breath. And they're like, oh, it's in your mind, right? Or I even remember when I was having my son, I had my son when I was like 21, 22. And I had a reaction to they gave me like I think it was Percocet. I don't know why you would give somebody like in labor. Now that I think about it, I don't know why you would give somebody Percocet for pain in labor and delivery. It's crazy. But
Yeah.
I had a reaction to it where I was itching like from head to toe. And I got to the point where I was like scratching blood out of my legs and my grandma like was holding my hands because it was just like I was itching so bad. And the nurse was like, "Oh, it's not that serious. Like you need to calm down. It's not that serious." And I was so happy that my grandma was there because my grandma went off. Like she was like, "No, like it is a serious. Look at her legs, right? She literally
Yeah.
has her own flesh underneath her fingernails, right?" So they did something and all the pain came back. Like all the pain came back. They gave me or they wanted to give me an epidural. They did the epidural wrong, so I still felt everything,
Oh.
right? And it's also this thing where they don't tell you epidural can sometimes be a spinal tap, which
Mm.
makes basically is your legs go numb and you feel everything. So it's all of these different things. And then my son, he was huge. He was 9 pounds. How big was Aiden? He was like 9 pounds, 5 ounces or something. He was like 22 inches long. He was massive. But when he came out, he had his chest poked out. And so he was stuck. He got stuck in the birth canal. And so the nurse was like, "Do you want us to break your hip or break his shoulder?" And this is his dad was 6'3", 300 pounds, right? And so I remember like going to my doctor's appointment before then where I was like, "Hey, can I have a C-section?" It was kind of a joke, but it was kind of serious. But it's like this baby's gonna be big. And so everything about that day, like the nurse checked my cervix and she accidentally broke my water, right? She checked my cervix after I told her I didn't want to have my cervix checked, right? And so if I would have known that I could have been like, no, stop, you can't do this, she wouldn't have
Yeah.
been able to do it, right? But then also my son probably would have been like 10, 15 pounds, right? And so going in there and like my grandma was like, why would you ask her that? But then I remember my grandma telling me that like when she was younger, they would sometimes break a baby's shoulder to get them out. But like you would never know because it's not like a baby's gonna come out and be like, oh my God, my shoulder. Right. But
Oh.
she was like, the fact that that lady asked me, it just made it so traumatic. Like it was just like, nope, I'm never gonna have another kid. Like ever, ever, ever. And so just remembering my own experience when I walk into situations with other women and wanting to coddle them and wanting to like answer all the questions and do all the things and save them from having even like an experience where the nurse has an attitude with you,
Hmm.
right? Because even then you can ask for a different nurse at any point, right? If you
Oh,
tell them like, hey, I don't want this OB or this nurse in here, they have to listen to you because it's
that's
your
good to
experience,
know.
not that. Yes. Oh yeah. I'll like even if you don't know anything, remember charge nurse. Remember charge nurse. The charge nurse is the nurse over all the other nurses. And you ask for her, be like, listen, I don't like this lady that you sent in here. I need you to send somebody else. And they have to. Legally, they have to send somebody else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but what happened with his shoulder or your hip?
They didn't break anything. I don't think they broke anything. They just did a whole bunch of rotating him and his big head and his wide shoulders, and he came out of my vagina.
Okay,
Like he
good.
came out.
Good. And his shoulders are fine
His
to this
shoulders,
day.
he's 12 now. His shoulders are completely fine.
Okay. Whew.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Going back to what you said about sex education.
Hmm.
So that's all part of this. I mean, it's how we get to this point where we're having children and things like
Hmm.
that. But it seems like nobody talks about it. Nobody really embraces Well, okay. I say that, but this is a huge generalization. Obviously, there's a spectrum of what people embrace and what they do sexually. But for the people who do feel repressed, what can we do to embrace sensuality and sexuality more in our lives? And is that even important?
It is very important because a lot of your, and I want to be careful about this because there's a fine line between sensuality and sexuality. I do believe they're completely different. A lot of your creative energy is comes from your sexual or your sensuality, right? And so if you think about, I don't know what you know about the chakras, but if you think about the sacral chakra, that's where your creativity lies. And so somebody who is repressed sexually, they're not going to express any form of sensuality, right? They're going to think it's wrong to kind of like live in your physical body, right? I think that a lot of that falls into trauma, right?
Okay.
It falls into trauma. And so like were you sexually abused as a child or were you told it was wrong when you ask your mom about something, right? Like for little boys, right? Did you get caught exploring yourself and then somebody made you feel like, oh, like that's disgusting. You're gonna go to hell. You're gonna go blind, right? So it just kind of getting to the root of where the issue is because if there is any repression there is a reason like because people I don't think people just grow up and are like because like babies again going back to kids being perfect, right? A kid will run through the house butt naked and not feel like anything's wrong, like they'll come have a full conversation with you in just socks and then nothing's wrong with that. But then as you age, right, you have this moment where if you're nude, you're kind of like, even with your sexual partners, I know for me, I'm going to speak for myself. There are even moments where, like, with my breasts, I'm kind of like, hey, like, so, you know what I mean? And that comes from trauma of my own, right? And so, I think it's important just to kind of get to the why. Like, why do you feel like this, right? Where is this coming from? Can we talk about it?
Yeah.
Is it something worth talking about? Right? Do you feel like it's important to talk about what happened to make you feel this way? Because yeah, that's important because it affects your day-to-day life.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so you mentioned that sensuality is more of that creativity, that
Mhm.
type of energy. What are there other differences between sexuality and sensuality that are important?
I feel like when you talk about sexuality, it's more so talking about your preference, whether you identify as heterosexual, homosexual, or all the things in between, or what do you like to
Mhm.
feel when engaged in that moment? So that's like about the act or about your preferences. I think your sensuality is more so your personality.
We have covered so many topics today,
Mhm.
and it's been
Okay.
really interesting. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you think is important to share?
No, not this early on a Saturday morning. My brain just my brain just doesn't register all the time. I'm
Yeah.
happy that I was able to like answer the questions.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Renee, how can listeners find you and your work?
Ooh. So I do this thing where I have a super love-hate relationship with social media. So right now you can find me everywhere under I am Renee Watkins. It'll get you to where you need to go. My website is rwyoga.net, but if you type in I am reneewatkins.com, it'll still pull up the same website.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Okay. So, everybody, all of that will be in the show notes for you to go check out. Grab those links, go visit Renee's site and her social media. And, Renee, thank you so much for coming on the show today and the
Yes.
work you're doing in the world.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. Check out more of our episodes here and at humanamplified.com. Remember to subscribe.